8 union territories, like you see here. I've already mentioned to you about it. And the capital is Kavarati, and Piti Islands is also, known for its bird sanctuary, right? 85% of population is literate. The fertility rate here, which becomes a very important subject today, is just 1.4 as compared to a national average of about 2.2. So this again becomes a very important subject today when we discuss the recent problems. And it has got a very low crime rate, in fact, one of the lowest in the country. And again, this issue is going to be brought up today because of some special acts that have been passed in spite of having the lowest crime rate, right? We have a naval base there by the name of Deep Rakshak. Right. So without wasting much time, I'll come back to you guys later. Without wasting much time, we have a very special guest today. And so sir is an ex IAS officer. He is from the 1968 batch, and he retired in 2005, and he was a secretary to the government of India and India's first chief information commissioner from 2005 to 2010. And he's also been served as a chairperson of the National Commission of Minorities. He's an alumnus of St. Stephen's College, Williams and Doon School, and he's also authored 2 books, My Years with Rajiv and My Kashmir. So WAJAHAT Habibullah, sir, it's a pleasure to have you. And we would like to know from you the problems that Lakshwadeep is facing today and what is the solution, and should the resolutions that have been recommended by the governor, by the administrator, should that be implemented or put in force, and what were the problems, sir? Right, sir. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for introducing the subject. Can you hear me quite clearly?
Yes, sir.
Good. And now I was posted as Administrator Lakshwadeep from the years 87 to 90. And of course, you mentioned some of the postings that I've held, but easily the best posting I ever had was my posting to Lakshwadeep. And it will become clear to you when I speak to you why I consider that to be the case, and why, therefore, the present decisions taken or the recommendations made by the present administrator, Mr. Praful Khuda Patel, are in fact not only undesirable, but positively dangerous. Now, these islands, and you have mentioned, of course, that they are islands located between 240 and 400 kilometers from the western coastline, the Kerala coastline. And as you mentioned, these are strategically important, not because the islands in themselves carry some sort of great military or other potential or threat, but because of their being there, they give us, as you mentioned, a huge exclusive economic zone in a very vital area, where the trade routes into West Asia and then further down into Africa too. But what is important for you to note at this point is that these are coral atolls. Therefore, they are among the world's most ecologically fragile ecosystems anywhere. You all have heard of the Great Barrier Reef. You've also heard of the great deal of money that has been spent recently by the government of Australia in conserving the Great Barrier Reef and the great damage which has been done to it over the past few years through misplaced ideas of development. Now, here is where the challenge lies. It has been mentioned to you that there has been four recommendations for legislation. There is the Lakshwadeep Animal Preservation Regulation, Lakshwadeep Prevention of Antisocial Activities Regulation, Lakshwadeep Development Authority Regulation, and amendment to the Lakshwadeep Panchayat staff rules. Each of these is not only not required, but in fact, the land regulation is positively one that is damaging from many points of view, and I'll come to that. But first, let me dispose of the first two. The animal preservation regulation. In fact, I would agree with the administration there that there's no need to actually grow bovine animals, to cultivate and breed bovine animals in the islands, and therefore we set up dairy farms, which were of course not set up at the time that I was administrator. It is something that is not environment friendly. And all that was therefore required was closing down the dairy farms. In fact, the Kerala High Court has now just yesterday struck down the government's orders to close those dairy farms as interfering in the social life and the food habits of the people. Now, I may not necessarily agree with that, but the fact is that consumption of beef, which has now been banned, is not traditionally a practice in Lakshwadeep. So there was no need to pass such a law. The second one, PASA for short, called the Gunda Act. Now, it will mention to you that the crime rate there is very low. And this is according to the National Crime Records Bureau. But I will go even a point further. Having been administrator there, I can tell you that there was in fact no crime rate. And that stems from a very closely knit tribal tradition. Something has been mentioned to you about the languages that are spoken there. The fact is that the entire population is totally tribal. It is entirely Muslim. It is also tribal. And because it is tribal, it is an extremely close-knit society. And any problems, social problems that arise within that society are resolved, have been resolved through social interventions for centuries. That's what it's always been like. And that is why the people of the Union Territory have been classified as scheduled tribes. It is true that the entire population is Muslim. Islam is not very clear as to when Islam came to the islands, but by about the 8th or 9th century, they had largely become Muslim. And the first preacher of Islam, there is the Hazrat Ubaidullah in an island called Androt, his mausoleum. He is supposed to have been a grandson of the first Khalifa, that's Abu Bakr. And he is credited with having brought Islam to the island, but there's various theories about when it came and how it came. Probably the local population was Buddhist before that. But this was not the consequence of any invasion, nor was the population implanted in the islands from elsewhere. This was an indigenous population. The reason why I'm bringing this to your notice is that this is a unique civilization, maybe scattered, as has been said, between 36 islands, out of which only 10 are actually inhabited. And the smallest of those islands is an island called Bitra, with a land area of only 0.10 square kilometers. The total land area is 32 square kilometers. And it is populated with a population which is now about 66,000. As we mentioned to you what the last census says, but my guess is about 66,000, not more. Because as has been mentioned to you, the National Health and Population Survey of 2019-2020 has placed the fertility rate at only 1.4, far lower than the national fertility rate of 2.2. Therefore, why do you need to have a regulation to limit the family of the members of Panchayat? Now, all these factors go against the cultural traditions of the island. When I told you that there is no crime rate, there were, yes, police stations. Every island is a police station. And each police station, because that is prescribed, has a lockup, one room which is there for any person arrested overnight. But during the whole time that I was there, those were never used. They were usually, the lockups are always used by people who had to stay overnight. You know, when there was some sort of function, late night function in the capital of Kavaratti, where the administrator and people who lived on other islands couldn't make it home by the evening and then had to leave the next morning, they would use this as a kind of restroom. It's also a place where everything was stored. And even rifles, because rifles were issued naturally to police stations, they were all stored in the lockup because there was no need for them. Now, in this kind of society, you want to bring in these regulations? Now, we come to the land regulation. This is something difficult. These are, as I mentioned to you, a tribal people, classified as such by the Anthropological Survey of India on perfectly logical, scientific grounds. Yet, some technical details have been found whereby, under the guise of development, it has been said that for bringing about development, now we need to do this. And what type of development, as has been mentioned? And the administrator has gone on record in a press conference to say that we want to develop it like Maldives, tourism. We want to develop tourism like the Maldives. The successor to the Planning Commission, the Niti Aayog, has itself come up with some sort of a scheme. It has recommended tourist development on the lines of Lakshwadeep, on the lines of, the Maldives. Now, I explained to you that I was administrator of Lakshwadeep in 1987. This had followed upon visits of the then Prime Minister, starting with 1985, to the island territories, both Lakshwadeep and the Andaman and Nicobar. I happened to have been on his staff and was accompanying him to all these, and therefore had occasion to actually discuss these with him, as well as with people within government. And in consequence of my visits, in fact, that when I was leaving his office, I myself opted to actually go and serve as administrator in Lakshwadeep. And as I said, I felt that that was the best posting I've ever had. Now, he strongly felt that what was happening was that the development programs, both in Lakshwadeep and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, were not development programs needed by the people of the island territories. And you can understand that very well, because coral atolls are a delicate environmental entity, a highly delicate, fragile ecology. Whereas Lakshwadeep Islands, like the Maldives, are coral atolls. The Andamans are volcanic islands. So the development schemes for the Andamans also had to be different to the development schemes of Lakshwadeep. And the Prime Minister was convinced that development schemes had to be specifically developed for the island territories. Now, may I say that we have every reason to be proud. India has every reason to be proud at the manner in which we have preserved Aboriginal tribal culture in Andamans and the ecological balance in Lakshwadeep. That ecological balance has come under threat. You've heard of the cyclones recently. They've done a damage of 30% to those islands. It has been calculated it will take several years, 20 years at least, for the islands to recover that. But now we are thinking of development schemes that are going to destroy even what is left. At that time, an island development authority was set up, of which the chairman was not some secretary to government, not even the head of a ministry, a minister. It was the prime minister himself. And the first meeting that Island Development Authority had in one of the island territories was in Lakshwadeep in 1988 when I was administrator. And a decision was taken at that time on the recommendation of a high-level committee headed by the leading island environmentalist at the time, Mr. M.P.K. Menon, member of the Planning Commission. This high-level committee had been sent to visit the Maldives to examine how the developments, because the Maldives is a coral atoll, study the development of the Maldives. Does it carry lessons for Lakshwadeep, which is also a coral group, coral archipelago? And that team came back with the recommendation that yes, there is a lesson to be learned by us. And that is, we must refrain from using the Lakshwadeep model, the Maldives model of development, because that had been irreversibly damaged the ecological fragility of the Maldives Islands, of their coral reefs. Now you know that the government of Maldives has been examining the possibilities of relocating parts of their population. Maldives is nowhere near as densely populated as Lakshadweep. Yet they feel that because of global warming and the rising sea levels, the islands are going to sink forever under the ocean. Now, coral is a living organism. Coral reefs grow slowly, but they will grow. And therefore, the effort has to be to keep them alive. If you start building on them, if you start extracting from them, you're going to kill them. You kill them, they will cease growing. Any damage suffered in consequence of ships coming in, going out, human activity, that will become irreplaceable. That is the lesson from the Great Barrier Reef. Do we want to do that to our island? Therefore, a decision was taken that we will avoid that. Unfortunately, according to this latest regulation, it is recommended that these will be opened up for development activities without specifying what is development. But has been mentioned that road building, what do you want to build roads there for? The longest island, which is Minicoy, is 11 kilometers from end to end, and its width does not exceed 1.5 kilometers. So what are you going to build roads for? Your effort should be to minimize roads and not have any pakka roads at all. Surely that is what would occur to somebody who is even an amateur environmentalists. Yet, this regulation goes on to say that it is going to promote development through mining and exploitation of mineral resources. Now, tell me, what are you going to mine for in a coral island? What are the mineral resources other than the coral island itself? So what you intend to do is to build up on the coral islands and dig up whatever is left. Are you going to preserve the environment through that means? Or are you going to destroy the environment through that means? Now, let us go to the idea of what is development. The idea of development is promoting it as tourist resorts on the lines of Maldives. The decision to open Lakshwadeep up for tourism was again a decision of the Island Development Authority, and I had a lot to do with it. At that time, it was decided that for Lakshwadeep, there will be high cost, low volume tourism because Lakshwadeep cannot accommodate large numbers of tourists. As I mentioned to you, the land here is 32 square kilometers, already so densely populated. Where are you going to accommodate the tourists? Therefore, those islands which are unpopulated, Bangaram you mentioned, that is an island that is uninhabited. That was opened up for tourism. But even with regard to that, the rights of the people were respected. The land on which tourism was developed in Bangaram, where the cottages were built, continued to be under the ownership of the community, which was the tribal community. And the person building the resort, which was the casino hotels of Kerala, which later on became the flagship of the ecotourism industry of Kerala. And the person who is the head of that is somebody that you can also communicate with, Jose Dominic. I'm sure he'll be happy to talk to you about it. The idea behind promotion of tourism in Lakshadweep was not to invite investments from abroad and the exploitation of the island territory by people who did not belong to the islands, but to generate wealth for the people from the islands. You know, it has been mentioned repeatedly that unemployment rate in Lakshadweep is very high. Unemployment rate in Lakshadweep is calculated according to employment and government. Now, and young people over there also want to go and join the government. But there are traditional occupations there for centuries, which you mentioned: coconut cultivation and tuna fishing. It is one of the richest areas for tuna fishing in the world. And there is, what you have to keep investing there is the ingress of these trawlers, which do mass fishing at the cost of the traditional fishermen there. Lakshadweep has been internationally famous. The great sailors of Muscat, people like Sinbad the sailor, where did they get their boats? They got their boats made in Lakshadweep, because Lakshadweep had refined the art of boat making. They called it sewn boats, because their boats were held together not by nails, but by ropes made of coconut hemp. So these have been only any idea of development mean promoting the fishing industry and promoting the coconut industry. Not bringing people from outside to discommode the local people. Now, tourism, when it is opened over there, has already achieved a great deal. And that is that scuba diving, among the instructors for scuba diving in Bombay and other parts of the country, all come from Lakshadweep. They received their training there in a diving school at Kadmat. one of the islands there. Now, that diving school has to be closed down every monsoon because in the monsoons, there are heavy rains and heavy winds. The islands cannot tolerate that. Structures in the islands cannot tolerate that. But Maldives, and what is recommended as a development activity in Lakshadweep also is to develop water villas. Water villas, according to these own estimates, are going to cost about 1 crore to build each of them. Their stilts will be built into the coral reef, so they will kill the coral reef. And they will not last a monsoon. The example of Maldives is given. Maldives doesn't fall within the monsoon zone. Lakshadweep does. So surely these matters should be taken into consideration at all times, and the development plans that have been made out for Lakshadweep. In fact, at that time, the Island Development Authority had laid down an environmentally sound strategy for both island groups, hinges on better exploitation of marine resources, coupled with much greater care in the use of land. Now, in light of this, in light of the records having been, in light of the studies having been made, how can we now claim that we are going to bring about development in the manner which is now envisaged? Then to say it's not developed. In fact, Mr. Patel has been on record as saying that the people over there are in a pitiable condition. If Mr. Patel has pity for the people, then do them the courtesy of please consulting them as to what sort of development they want. The question is that in Lakshadweep, you have the highest percentage use of non-conventional energy source. Namely, each of these islands is supplied, even Piti, which I mentioned to you, the island territory of 0.10 square kilometers. Each of them is serviced by solar panels, which have been installed there since my time. Modernize those solar panels, yes, certainly. But they are there. Isn't that development? They have wind energy, a wind energy unit in coverage. Shouldn't that be expanded on? They have desalination plants. In Kavaratti, they were installed in other islands, but the technology had not proved viable. Find that technology for promoting the use of fresh water, supplying fresh water to the islands. But when I talk of supplying fresh water, every home in Lakshadweep has water harvesting facilities. Does Gujarat have that? Does every village in Gujarat, which is the home state of Mr. Patel, have solar panels? Then what development are you talking of? There is, as you mentioned, 100% literacy of those islands. Not 85%, it is 100%. In technical jargon, it could be a certain, because little infants, little children, you can say are not literate. But there is total literacy of those islands. The fertility rates, as has been told to you, as you have yourself said, are low. In all matters of human development indexes, Lakshadweep features much higher than Gujarat. Yes, in terms of employment, you can say there's high unemployment. That is because when people obtain employment, they move on to Kerala or other places, like working in hospitals. They have a number of doctors. There's not enough space for doctors in Lakshwadeep. There are not enough facilities. So doctors go and serve on the mainland. Large numbers of people who joined government serve on the mainland. So you will say they're unemployed. I mentioned to you earlier, it is a form of disguised unemployment, because young people register themselves unemployed because once they've got educated, they want to become peons in government hospitals. It is characteristic not only of Lakshadweep, all over India you will find this character. They don't want to go out and do fishing in open boats. So these are some of the items that I thought I would mention to you as areas of concern with regard to these new regulations. What is required is to go back to the studies that have already been done and go forward with that. But first of all, and you know, a group of us, we call us as a constitutional conduct group of retired civil servants, have written to the government appealing for the fact that Lakshadweep has always had a regular administrator, a permanent administrator. Even though you mentioned it as a teeny-weeny unit. In fact, when I was posted there, it was regarded as a punishment post because of lack of facilities there. Now it has every kind of facility. It has telephone services. Yes, internet facilities need to be improved upon. And an airport, one of the schemes in this land development regulation is to build international size airports. Why do you need an international size airport? How many people are you going to have coming and visiting there? Where is the space to accommodate that large number of people? Certainly, improve the airport. Certainly, it's a primitive airport. Improve it. But you don't need to destroy the islands to improve the airport. These are all factors which should be built in to any development program and have been already worked on by the best minds in the country. But this clause of, mining and so forth, it smacks to me of an intention to destroy the island. If you destroy the ecology of the island, you will destroy the island. Let me now come to the final part of what I wanted to say. And this is important because you had mentioned the strategic importance of these islands. And I had told you what in my view is the strategic importance. It is policed by the Indian Navy, which has regular areas where it patrols and goes on. There has been a Coast Guard. In my time, there was no Coast Guard located in the islands, but there is now. But recently, you would have heard that some smuggling activity initiated in Sri Lanka was caught off a sandbank in the island territories. The point to note there is not that it took place. The point to be noted there is how quickly it was detected. Immediately. A great deal is made of the value of the products there, as if this will undermine the island. How is it going to undermine the island? As I told you, the islands are a close-knit tribal territory. For any person to infiltrate the islands is impossible. Try it. Land on the island secretly and try and go and start living among the people. They'll immediately they'll tell you that who are you? They'll immediately report it to the administration that there's a strange person in our midst. Besides which, this is a matriarchal society. Being able to enter a home is an impossibility. A strange man coming inside a home headed by a matriarch. Can you imagine that happening? That is its own security. You are saying you want to model it on the Maldives. What happened in the Maldives in the 1980s? The Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force had to go to the rescue of the president there because a whole lot of infiltrators had come in and virtually taken over the islands. The president was running from house to house before the security came to know that he had been taken over. There is no such threat, no such danger in Lakshwadeep. Why? Because of its people. What you need to do is strengthen the presence of the people there. That is your greatest security. And that has been realized. The Indian Navy has taken pains to cultivate the local people. There are a number of people from Minicoy particularly who work in the maritime navy. The reason why the society there is matriarchal is because men would work at naval ratings and so forth. And in those old days, it would take a long time for a man to come back. So therefore, the women owned the property in his absence. Now, with all these factors in our favor in those territories, it is not surprising why Lakshadweep has never been even noticed by anyone in the rest of the country, except as a destination, also one which is not easy to get to. As I mentioned to you, it was not an inexpensive tourist destination, but one that people would covet. And top movie stars, Richard Gere, people like that have visited Lakshadweep. These coral islands are a unique feature of our own ecological landscape. Let us be proud of them. Let us build them and strengthen them, not to destroy them by trying to follow discredited imitation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So one point I would like to ask you here is that if you see the panchayati, it has a very active panchayati Raj system there, and there has been a rule on, there has been a recommendation for restricting, the powers of panchayat. One, and second is that those who have more than 2 kids, they won't be allowed to contest in the election. And even the powers, it's recommended that the powers would be curtailed. I mean, with respect to fishing and animal husbandry and so on and so forth. So, why do you think is this has Mr. Praful Patel given this recommendation? What is the intent behind it?
The point is that when I mentioned to you the various regulations he's seeking to pass, particularly land regulation, these are not acceptable to the people.
Right.
I think they've demonstrated that already.
Right.
And they're not going to be acceptable to the panchayat. Now, the panchayat system was introduced when I was administrator Lakshadweep, because in fact, the 73rd and 74th amendments in the Constitution of India came after that. But in working towards the 73rd and 74th amendments in the Prime Minister's office, I was holding that charge before I left it. And therefore, what we were intending to do at the national level, I felt we could use it and institute it in Lakshadweep. The idea being to give the people a voice in their governance, which is what the Panchayati Raj system attempts to do. It's a part of our constitution. And we pride ourselves on being a democracy. Many people say the world's largest democracy. I say yes, the world's largest democracy, no doubt, but also among the world's most advanced democracies in the kind of freedom that we have given right down to the village level to our people, institutionalized, constitution. Now, the effort to weaken Panchayat Raj, in any case, the Panchayats that I had introduced after the 73rd and 74th Amendment came out, they were further weakened. In fact, the Island Development Council, which had met under the Island Development Authority in 1988, which I mentioned, was the first such institution elected under those rules which were made at that time. But put that aside. Now, the fact is that I can only guess the present administrator would not like the people to have a voice in the development schemes that he plans. Why would he not like that voice? Because as I mentioned to you, these development schemes that he plans are damaging to the ecological and social health of the island territory. They're bound to be opposed. That, therefore, you have this and the Gunda Act to try and suppress any form of opposition to what these development schemes plan to do. So what is the purpose? What is the purpose? Development is supposed to really bring about a better quality of life for the people. I think you will all agree with me, your students would also agree. Development is not supposed to be a scheme of generating money for investors from elsewhere. If they can also come and invest and increase their wealth, working with the local people, fine. But that was how the old tourism scheme of Lakshwadeep was actually modeled. And I mentioned to you, Rose Dominic from Kerala came and invested in Lakshwadeep, worked with the local people, employed the local people in his resort, and did what he did. And that is one of the reasons why he felt the Maldives model was not suitable to Lakshwadeep. Because it brought investment from elsewhere, and the local people in Maldives were not even open to them to move around their own islands. Except for those who were employed on a particular island, other islanders were not allowed to enter those islands. Do we want to do that to our own people? I'm sorry.
So I want to ask one thing that if we leave this ecological imbalance happening, the corals are going to get affected, and if we just kind of, just remove that bit for a sec and just think about development. I mean, because Mr. Praful Patel is talking about development, so I'm just trying to understand if we are just pushing the development agenda, and won't that bring more employment and more money to the people there? I mean, yes, doing something, they're already doing export of tuna fish and coconut fabric, etc. But I'm saying that if there is a possibility, that is of getting some resorts, and because of which revenue churn coming in, more people are going to get employed from that particular place. I'm understanding the ecological imbalance bit there, sir, but I'm just trying to understand that won't that help the people in some way?
Help them by what? By taking away their homes. They're left homeless and employed in a factory, and that is very helpful. Is it? That's what you think. And the factory, which is a factory, the only factory you can put up there is a cement factory. So digging up the island with very restricted area to live in. Since, as you know, it is already heavily populated, already the most densely populated in the country. So right. you get rid of the people. A few of them you employ, yes. Those few who you employ, yes, you say, well, so many. Only before this, nobody was employed. Now 10 are employed. The rest 90, of course, have gone away, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Now, is that what you call development?
Right.
Please tell me, is that what you call development?
No, not at all. So what about the other uninhabited islands?
Development is the improvement of the quality of life of the people. improving the education facilities, improving their health, improving their health
Right, sir.
facilities, improving their living facilities. Isn't that what you mean by
Yes.
development?
Yes.
Why do you want to get employment? To be able to live better, surely. You don't want to get employment if it means that you get rid of your own home and you're getting to work in a factory. I mean, look what has happened in the forests of Karnataka. The people, the tribals, were earlier the owners of the minor forest produce are now laborers. Now, you may say that, well, they are getting employment. They are laborers in these, among the forest lessees. The forests are disappearing also. Oh, so what? You said, leave aside the environmental side. The forests may go, people are getting employment. Is that your logic?
Right, sir.
That is your logic.
No, I understand your point entirely, sir. Yeah. So one more thing I want to ask. There are about 10 islands that are inhabited there.
Yes.
What about the other islands, sir? The other 26,
islands are
25 islands?
uninhabited because they do not have enough. They don't have sources of fresh water.
Okay.
Adequate resources of fresh water. You know the Coral Islands. Its source of fresh water is underground water. It is a small lens of fresh water which floats on saline water in a coral island. How does that happen? Because the saline water, as it rises, the fresh water as it rises from the saline water gets filtered by the coral. And therefore what you get on top is a filtered lens. Now, in fact, in my time, and now all the islands have piped water facilities, but not adequate piped water facilities. The piped water facilities came about because earlier, one of my predecessors, the administrators, had felt he'd installed pumps in the island territories and pump out the fresh water. The islanders are the ones who brought to his notice that he pumps out the fresh water, and the fresh water lens will not remain. Because the very act of pumping will pump the saline water into the fresh water, and the fresh water lens will not remain. And therefore, the island will become uninhabited. And therefore, a scheme was developed by the National Institute of Oceanography for how the freshwater lens could be drained into a well from where the water could be pumped up to be used as piped water. This and rainwater harvesting were the solutions thought of. That I would call development. That I would call development.
Right.
Now, that is how you can bring about development even in the uninhabited islands. Yes. And if you bring about this kind of development in the uninhabited islands and make them habitable, make them, no doubt, habitable even for tourists. Fine.
Absolutely.
But that is not what this plan is.
Yes. Right. So can we take up some questions now if...
Please.
So are there any questions? Yeah, please ask your questions. Go ahead.
Okay, what is matriarchal society? This is the question that I've got. Now, this is an interesting question. It's a social phenomenon. In a matriarchal society, the woman is the head of the family. It is a kind of tribal tradition. In Kerala, you have the Naya section of society, in which you have matrilineal society. That means descent is through the female line. The female is also the owner of the property. How does that work? A household has a dowager, has the senior most lady is a kind of dowager. She is in fact the head of the household. She's served by the most senior male member of the household, who is known as a Karnava. So he does all the external kind of work. He, going out and looking after the property, seeing that the labor is employed for, say, coconut harvesting, seeing that the fishermen are bringing in their work and all that. That is the job of. But the home, the house is owned by the dowager. And a person who marries into that house, he doesn't take the wife to his house. He has to come to his wife's house. And it's interesting how it works in Lakshwadeep. I don't know how it works in Kerala, but there will be others among you who are from Kerala and will be able to tell you. But how it works in Lakshwadeep is that the husband and wife are assigned a certain section of Sarawak. They live there, and the husband has access to that area. He can come and go. He has keys. He has all that. Now, in Lakshadweep, if a wife wishes to divorce her husband, all this debate about triple talaq and all that kind of thing, there will be, and as I told you, this is also a Muslim area. But if a wife wishes to divorce her husband, then she simply places his shoes outside the door. He comes in to enter his home at night. If he finds his shoes outside the door, it means, sorry, you're divorced. And that's the end of that. The wife will then take another husband. So I don't know if you find this an attractive tradition, but that is very much so. It was there also the practice just very recently, but now more and more. Of course, the local people have turned to more traditional Islamic ways of resolving social harmony.
Satyam, you're muted.
So there's one interesting question here. What happens if the government passes these, accepts these regulations, recommendations, and people don't accept it? Where are we then, sir?
Well, you see, already the people have not accepted it. They are protesting against it. The government has reacted by actually saying people cannot come out of their homes, but even from within their homes and through Zoom and other activities, because I told you, the people there are all totally educated. So they're not going to necessarily be browbeaten. There will be protests. And of course, government will be considering these matters. But at the same time, the matters have already been challenged in the court. Now, the regulations, these have not yet come before the court because they're not yet law. So you can't start challenging a regulation before it becomes a law. But, I mean, you can't challenge a draft regulation before it becomes a law. But already today, as I mentioned to you, the High Court has started ruling on these orders. And already they have stayed some orders. So now, luckily, our country does not lend itself to the government being able to override. We are a democracy, and we have different elements of that democracy. There are the courts, there's the political leverage. So the political parties have all got together, in fact. All the opposition parties have got together in this matter. And then, of course, ultimately, in a democracy, the government is constrained to listen to its people. And the people are represented in this case by an MP, who is a local resident, Mr. Faisal. And it is represented by its panchayat. So the panchayats and the MP will have to take a stand in matters which concern the local people. Luckily, in our democratic system, each of these has an outlet.
Right. So what about, there was one last question I wanted to ask you. What about the shifting of the port? I mean, earlier Kochi and Cochin, they were the most important ports. Now it's being, they're saying that they're going to change the port to Mangalore. So what is the reason behind it?
There probably is a political reason behind it because Karnataka is a state which is ruled by the same government as the government of India. But I don't think that is necessarily terribly important. Cochin was the main, and the port facilities are there. If they wish to change them to Bangalore, that's all right. The local fishermen have always used Bayport outside Calicut as the fishing port, fishing harbor, and they will continue to do so.
All right. Okay.
Because that is not something that is regulated. That really depends on the facilities that are provided at the port. And those
Right.
facilities
Right.
will be provided by the government of Kerala. If
Okay.
government of Karnataka also provides the facilities in Mangalore, all the better. The more ports from which you can approach Lakshwadeep, the better.
All right, sir. So thank you very much. I think we had a great session, and it was, I think it was absolutely awesome in terms of just understanding the entire thing. You've been there, done it, and thank you very much, sir, for such a great session. Surbi,
But
would you like to join?
I hope the young persons all enjoyed this, and I hope I've whetted their appetite to visit Lakshadweep.
Yes, of course, sir. I'm sure they're going to visit. Yeah.
But I will repeat what I said earlier. I've been posted in Kashmir, I've been posted in Delhi, I've been posted in Washington, D.C. But the best posting I've ever had is Lakshadweep. Why? Because the place and its people, mind you, the place and its people are easily the most beautiful that I have ever come across. So please take note of that.
Yes.
And follow my advice.
Yes.
On behalf of all the students, sir, if you can cast a glance at the chat box, it's ringing and thundering. All the students are thanking you, and in fact, all of us for organizing this session. So on behalf of all the students, I would like to thank you once again, and I would like to inform all our students that most of these students, sir, are civil services aspirants also.
Jolly good.
So sir was the head of the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy, which is where civil service, those who crack civil services, all of them go and get their training. So I think he was there between 2000 to 2003 as the director of
That's
even
correct.
the LBS NA. Yes. So, you people are really, really lucky that sir agreed to talk to all of you. And these are the young people who are going to take over and make a difference to this country. And we all always feel that they should get perspective of whatever they learn. So Lakshwadeep is probably going to be a part of their exam. And talking to you today here, listening into you, they've got that perspective and they need the correct perspective. That is why we request all of you to please talk to these young people. They will soon get into grad school and then probably move on ahead. Some will be civil servants. Probably some will be administrators of Lakshwadeep, if Lakshwadeep is still there, considering the kind of ravages we have been hearing about. So, they'll probably remember this lecture and take cue from here, the right way to think, the right way to reason. So thank you so much for providing that, sir.
Not at all. And I will just add a little footnote. You mentioned the fact that I was director of the Academy of Administration. Yes, I was. But I always refer to those who pass through as officer trainees. I refer to them then as my children, and I refer them to them even now as my children, because although they have had about 20 years of service now, they still, for me, are my children. Thank
How
you.
nice, how lovely. Thank you so much, sir. And you can see the chat box is flooded with all those thank yous. So they will definitely come your way. Thank you so much, Satyam, for conducting
Always
this session.
welcome. Always welcome.
We might trouble you again for some other session, sir. I hope you will agree to come in. I'm asking you here because you're going to say yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed. All right, I'll just, what I'll do is I'll quickly take you through the slides and you can just take a note of it. And, or maybe I just put this on your My Zone. So if you want me to take you through the slides, I can do that right away. All right. So I'll just quickly, for those of you who do not know anything about Lakshwadeep issue, I think it's important for you to just understand this issue because this is a burning topic. And so it'll take me just 7 to 8 minutes, and you can understand the problem, just read about it, from your examination perspective also, right? So, all right. So it means 1 lakh islands, reorganization of Indian states in 1956, Sardar Patel, right? The new territory was called Lakadeve, Minikoy, and Amandevi. So in 1973, it was given this name, Lakshwadeep, right? And it is the smallest, it is the smallest union territory of India, only 32 square kilometers. Okay. So it's one of the 8 union territories. The other union territories are Jammu Kashmir, Ladakh, Chandigarh, Delhi, Dadar and Nagar Haveli, and Daman and Diu. So in fact, Mr. Praful Patel, मुझे लिखना है इसमें. Mr. Praful Patel he took over as Lakshwadeep as the additional charge after the death of Dinesh Sharma, who was an IPS officer in December. Right.
Color को
that's okay. Okay, Andaman, Nicobar, and Puducherry. So Delhi has a legislative assembly, JNK has it, and Pondicherry has it, right? So they all have a legislative assembly. So it's an archipelago, cluster of islands. It has 36 islands. One of them has submerged. It's called Paraveli 1, and the total area is 32 square kilometers. The capital is Kavarati, and this is the main town here. Piti Island is a place where you have a bird sanctuary. So that's here, right? Bitra is the northmost island here, right? So if you see, if you go down south, Lakshwadeep, then you have the Maldives. And so Minikoy, somewhere here is Maldives. And then you have Chagos Islands, right? Which is the UK island, and which is owned by UK, and or UK claims rights to it. It lost this. There was this ICG hearing in 2019 in which it was asked to give this to to Maldives, but they still continue to occupy that because it also has a US military base. So this entire belt of Lakshwadeep, Maldives, and Chagos, right? And if you go down there, you have Antarctica, right? So this area becomes critical. There's nothing there, right? So for India, it becomes a very strategic location. So this is your, so one of the choke points you have. If you go right there, that's your Middle East. So that's why it becomes a very crucial location for us. Strait of Malacca is somewhere here. So it's like this. 95% literacy, majority of people are Muslims. Like I mentioned, 94% main occupation is fishing and coconut cultivation. So tuna, it is actually called mas. So it is, it is dried and smoked and then exported. Very, very low on crime, one of the lowest in terms of crime index. And it has an Indian Navy base, which is called INS Dweep Rakshak, right? So one important thing that you must do is just understand about what is an atoll, right? So it has 12 atolls, Lakshwadeep. And, if I just explain this to you, you basically have a landmass and there is a reef and you have water in between. So this is a lagoon. So this is what an atoll is. So Lakshwadeep has 12 such atolls. So just go through these 3 basic things. What is a barrier reef? Like you have the Great Barrier Reef. So it runs parallel to the coast, right? You have fringing reef, which is just adjoining the coast, right? And you have the atolls, right? So please read about it, about the barrier reef, about atolls, and about fringing reef, right? Which is important. They might ask you questions from this. Okay, so like Sir had also mentioned, it is a matriarchal society, and so mother being the head of the family, and it really gives India a vast and exclusive economic zone. So we have about 4 lakh square kilometer of economic zone. And it is because of the spread of the islands here, right? I've also spoken about the language. So about 84% is Malayalam, and their cultural, their behavior is very similar to people from Kerala, right? So fishery is the primary occupation. Minicoy Islands has this language, and so that's about it. I think these are the 4 acts that they have passed. The Lakshwadeep Development Act regulation, and in which they can relocate and occupy any land for town planning or any development activity. They can take over any land without any consultation with the stakeholders, right? So islanders feel that this is uh, an attempt for corporate land grab, right? The government says that the intent is for developing, and they will not really get into the you know like they won't spoil the close ecosystem that this particular land has, but any development work would lead to eviction of people from their houses, because it's a very small island and very, very densely populated. So there are 2,000 people per square kilometer. Therefore, any development here would actually lead to eviction of people from their houses. So that has to be taken. Gunda Act, like we have already mentioned, person can be detained. So if you have a house and government decides to build a house there and you protest, you could go under a Gunda Act. Meaning that's the extreme that you can see, right? Language which is mostly spoken is Malayalam, right? The other language, which is about 14%, is the same language that is spoken in Maldives. Mahi, I've mentioned that in my previous slide. Devehi of Maldives, right? The next thing that we have to look at is that a lot of bureaucratic measures have been put in. Now it's a small, the 32 square kilometer is the land size, and for any small thing, for instance, there is, there's an emergency, you have to be airlifted to Kerala. I mean, so even for that, now there are a lot of bureaucratic measures that have been put in, right? So there is a lot of unrest among the people because of all this. And recently, people who were living in the coastal area, their houses, their huts were removed. Even liquor now, so it's against the religion. Earlier, liquor was only allowed in Bangaram. Okay, just to mention one point, even because of this ecological imbalance, Bangaram is also, 10% submerged in water. So I'd already mentioned that one island was, out of these 36 islands, one island is completely submerged, Pavarti 1. Number 2 is, almost 80%. Pavarti 2 is, Pyari 2 is about 85% submerged now, right? So because of the liquor being allowed in more islands, the people there feel that this will, spoil their socio-economic fabric, right? So this is the other law. So you must just know about these laws now. So one is the Lakshwadeep land development law that has come in. The second one is the Gunda Act. The third one is the liquor sale, which is allowed. And the fourth one is the anti-beef slaughter law, right? Now, actually, there is no cow in Lakshadweep, and this has been there, like Kerala. So their eating, their cultural pattern is almost the same, right? So was there a need to get a beef ban here? So even from the midday meal scheme, uh, red meat has been removed. The next thing was that if you look at the Panchayati Raj regulation, anybody having more than 2 children, will not be allowed to contest the election, right? So, and moreover, most of their powers have been reduced. So we have to take people along. I mean, if we have to, you know, we are a democracy, so taking people along is very, very important, right? So somewhere I think there people do feel that their rights are being taken away and things are being imposed on them, uh, right? And what was the need of so like I mentioned, the fertility rate of Lakshwadeep is just about 1.4 as against the uh, national average of 2.2. So why was there a need for getting something like panchayati, the banning parents with more than 2 children contesting the election, right? So recently, if you see, there is a social media campaign going on, which is called Save Lakshwadeep. There was a sedition case, which is Section 124A against Aisha Sultan for during a TV debate, she used this term called bioweapon, or she's been granted bail now. And one more thing, we have to understand is that till December, there was not even one COVID case in Lakshwadeep, right? And as soon as Mr. Praful Patel took over as the administrator, the protocols, earlier there was a quarantine of 7 days. The protocols were removed and there was just the RT-PCR test and the cases just shot up. So they had now they have about 7,500 cases in Lakshwadeep, right? So since it is, densely populated, therefore it spread very fast. And any medical, the facilities there are not that great. They have to be flown to Kerala. Therefore, there was a panic situation there, right? Yeah, you must have heard about this, that there was a US destroyer which came inside the economic zone of Lakshwadeep. And so if you know about the economic zone, from the coast, it is about 200 nautical miles, which is approximately into 1.8. That makes it about 360 kilometers. So this destroyer had come inside our economic zone, and that's it. So I've generally covered everything, and I would want you to go through this topic once again. The territory gives 20,000 square kilometers of territorial waters and 4 lakh square kilometers of economic zone. So I think this is a very crucial area for us. And since India is part of the Quad, right? And Quad is USA, Australia, and Japan. Therefore, the focus is on Indo-Pacific region, right? And if you see, even US is there at the Chagos Island. So they have a military base there. All right, so please go through it. It's a very important topic, and I think you must, read it properly. Any other question that you have? So I'll just style this PPT a little bit and then upload it. Anything that you would like to ask? So in Panchayati election, they have 50% reservation. They have recommended 50% reservation for women. I don't think so, Vivek. We should get into it, whether he's a political person or not. The point is that the legislations that have been recommended, I mean, that's not pro people. And like Sir had mentioned, it's not pro development in real terms. Because of tourism, the revenues might come, but the local people will not benefit substantially, Well, see, if you see Kerala, and the language spoken is Malayalam. The education system of Lakshwadeep follows the pattern of Kerala, and there's a lot of bonding with people from Kerala. In fact, uh, like I said, 84% people here speak Malayali, and they are basically migrants from the Malabar coast of the southwest India, basically Kerala, right? So their pattern is very similar to that of people from Kerala, right? And their eating patterns, uh, their cultural pattern, everything is very, very similar to Kerala. Therefore, I mean, the question should be, why is beef not banned in Kerala? I mean, that's their eating pattern, right? Whether it is right or wrong, that's their pattern. It's happening from centuries. Therefore, was there a need to do it? That's like, there are other priority issues right now with us, and I think that should be taken care of. So something should have been done for improving the coconut fabric, uh, production, something to improve their boat making skills, something to improve the desalinization, right? So development in real terms would have been this, right? Uh, the debate is still on. I mean, uh, whether his intent is good and he, has not studied the local issues properly. I think that is what we need to understand. That is why, uh, you know, uh, uh, till now, you've had administrators from IAS and IPS basically heading, this territory, right? So there is some kind of answerability here. Uh, you might have some vested interests when a political person takes over the post, but they may have some counter arguments. So I would really not like to take a stand here. But yes, the policies, like it on the face of it, it is not pro people, and you have had an opinion from an person who has worked as an administrator. He told you the exact reality of Lakshwadeep. I mean, where is a place to build those resorts, at the cost of moving out the people, right? Uh, Aishwarya, I think that's already answered. Jobs, highly unemployed. So it's a disguised unemployment there. They are doing fishing, but yeah, job in terms of government jobs, yes, it's not there, right? But people are literate, and we need to promote more. I think what they're good at, uh, tuna fishing, they could do coconut fabric making, etc. Well, the point is, what's wrong in controlling population? The point is it a priority right now? I mean, there should be other priorities. And I think the most important thing in Lakshadweep should be the ecological balance. You see, the islands are submerging there. One island is already submerged. Four of them are almost 50% submerged. So out of those 36 islands, right, uh, in the next 5 or 6 years, five islands are going to be completely submerged. And why does this happen? Because of global warming, right? You have melting of ice, Antarctica, Arctic, the sea level rises, and therefore submerging happens. So you need to worry about building embankments or doing something to to ensure that this submerging doesn't happen. I mean, that's what is most important here. So the climate change is a big issue, right? So and Maldives is completely dependent on tourism as a revenue churner, right? Maldives is completely dependent on it. We aren't dependent on tourism, for as far as India is concerned. I mean, if you want to do tourism, promote Goa, have more resorts built around the Malabar coast, the Bay of Bengal coast. You could have a lot of tourism there. But these islands are very, very ecologically sensitive, right? If we promote tourism there, the corals, right, will automatically die, and the kind of great beauty that we have of corals will be lost, and we'll be very one of the few countries in the world they have that has coral reefs. Meaning, you see the Great Barrier Reef, right? You have atolls here. Because of atolls, you have the coral reefs here. So I think that's one of the amazing things with Lakshadweep. So that has to be maintained. I mean, if you have more people going there and more tourism happening, it's going to get disturbed definitely. Great Barrier Reef, they had, because of COVID and all, they had some 7 to 8 months to basically resurrect the thing. So it's much better now. Otherwise, there were issues there, there were problems there, right? Which was even raised at the UN environmental forums. Climate change is the reason. Well, there might be vested interests, Shristi, that they want to avoid the consultation with the people. So that might be one of the reasons, and bulldoze their ideas. But it's a democratic country. Courts are also there. I mean, so I'm sure that there will be a solution, and the people at the top management, at the higher ups, would definitely listen to these problems. Right? So I guess we are almost done. I've answered your questions. So anything else that you would like to ask? So buffaloes, oxen, but no cows. Yeah, so let's not get into it. I mean, I don't think so. They might have a different agenda. So I don't know whether they are trying to promote a certain ideology. Yeah, so I think that's already been mentioned. Promoting the stuff where they have core competence. So they have core competence in coconut fabric, right? So that is something that can be promoted, right? It could be in the form of making this tuna fishing even more scalable, right? I see. It's a very sensitive place. I mean, you don't have to necessarily see economics from Lakshadweep point of view. I mean, you have other places from where you can do business, right? So let's be happy with what we have and nurture it, rather than kind of just looking at it as a source of revenue. This isn't a place for a source of revenue, right? You have tribals living here. Our parliament has special acts for helping out these people, right? So this is a very close-knit society. This is not a place for expecting great revenues, right? There's a place for maintaining whatever we are left with, and maintaining that ecosystem, that balance, right? So that's very important. If we don't maintain that balance, uh, maybe 100 years down the line, we won't even have Lakshadweep existing. And like sir had mentioned, it's not an organic island like Andaman and Nicobar. These are coral reefs, and it depends a lot on the existence of the corals, right? So please go through this topic of how an atoll is formed, right? So I think that is also going to clear a lot of things. In due course of time, you won't even have the little islands that you have that might go inside the water. So the existence of corals is very, very important for that. Well, they both are different places. The Great Nicobar and Lakshadweep are, so Nicobar is again environmentally sensitive, but an organic island. This is not an organic island. All right, I think I've answered your questions. So we had a great time, though I'm not a GK teacher, and but I really enjoyed conducting this session. And and I wish you all the best. Your exam is next month, and I hope you guys crack it. So all the very best, and we look forward to seeing you for more sessions like this on Prime Time. All right, thank you very much, and bye. Have a good day. All the best. Bye-bye.